Today we're going to hear from Fernando Angelucci, who's the co-founder of Self-Storage Syndicated Equities. They've raised over $200 million, and he's done something that I'm very interested in, which is merging an entrepreneurial business, scaled it within the real estate industry. Check it out. All right, Fernando, thanks so much for hopping on the show. Really excited to talk with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chad.
Yeah, this is a treat. You and I are both in Raise Masters together, one of our mastermind groups, and it's a lot of great people in that group. I think we're almost like 450 people now, so It's a big group. You definitely don't know everybody in the group, but you stood out to me just because of your background in self storage. And I just did my first self-storage deal as a general partner, done a lot of multifamily, but you've kind of gone through that transition a bit. And so I was hoping to dive into that and then also talk a lot about your entrepreneurial journey, because you've really focused on growing a business out of this. And I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, either started or helped start 6 different companies. So that's kind of in my DNA for sure. And so definitely wanted to dive into that as well.
Let's do it.
Cool. So why don't we start in the beginning? Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and how you decided to get into real estate.
Yeah, so son of 2 immigrants. They kind of had the old school American dream of get good grades, go to school, graduate, go work at some Fortune 50 company and retire with a pension after 40 years. That was basically the plan until I turned 16. And then I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that really changed the way I looked at wealth and work. So I told my parents that, hey, I think I'm going to become a business owner. And my dad basically, said over my dad's body, you got to have a degree to fall back on. And that degree has to end in the words engineering. So I said, okay. Went to school for an engineering degree. And the first foray I had into entrepreneurship was my freshman year. I was 19 years old. Somebody walked into my physics class and asked, raise your hand if you want to make $10,000 this summer. So I put my hand up, and turns out it was running a painting company with kind of back end support from this master organization. And that first summer, I made something like $62,000. It was to this day, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, just because I had no experience running a business and I was literally learning everything trial by fire. So that was a very interesting experience. And then, fast forward, I ended up.
Fernando, was that the Student Painters?
Yeah, it was called College Works. It was one of the versions of that. Yeah, College Works painting.
With Cameron Herold?
I don't think so. Maybe a different company.
Okay, yeah, because Cameron Herold did that. The COO Alliance guy, Double. He's a pretty famous guy now, but that's where he started, and he would say how hard it was for get all these painters in. A lot of them were college painters, and they get these college painters in, train them up really quick, and then just have them go paint houses for 3 months. But it sounded like a ton of work, and you're officially verifying it.
Yeah, so I would leave classes at 3:30 p.m. on Friday. I'd take a bus from Champaign-Urbana all the way up to Chicago, so 2.5, 3-hour drive, sometimes 4 hours. Then I would immediately just start knocking on doors throughout the whole weekend, and then take a bus back to campus Sunday night. So I'd basically door knock. So if you want to learn kind of school of hard knocks, how to do sales, door knock is probably one of the hardest things you can do. And then I just basically went up to people and said, hey, your house looks terrible. Can I offer to give you an estimate to paint your house this summer? And it'd be all students. So I hired all my friends from college. And that year we did the kind of record-breaking production. Not only me, but then the team I was on under this one mentor, we broke records that year. So it was super interesting. It was definitely extremely difficult. But that kind of gave me the taste of the entrepreneurial spirit. I said, hey, I can dictate my own time. I get to solve problems. Something that really kind of endeared me to the entrepreneurial spirit. So fast forward, I did end up getting my engineering degree. I got hired by Dow Chemical 6 months before I graduated, and ended up moving to Iowa to work that division. And then when I got there, I immediately started investing in real estate. So it started off doing wholesaling of single family homes, then fix and flip, then buy and hold. And then from there, we went on to, multifamily, getting some more units under the same roof. And then around 2016, I started to get pretty fed up with the laws that were in place, the very tenant friendly laws in the states that I was investing in. I was basically doing what was close to home. So Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, a little bit of Ohio, a little bit of Wisconsin, and realized how difficult it is to be a landlord when you have a quote unquote professional tenant, right? They know all the rules, they know how to extend their eviction date. So I had a property that it was almost 8 months before I was able to get the tenant out. And then when she left, she caused like $25,000 worth of damage. And that was when I said, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm going to go into an asset class where someone isn't living in my investment and I'm not at the whim of someone's good graces or not. So 2016 started selling off all of our habitation-based real estate through 2018. And then in 2018 is when I bought my first self-storage facility, August of 2018. And then since that time, we've done $220 million of storage. I have $140 million in the pipeline to do over the next 12 to 18 months. So the company's been growing exponentially, geometrically, if you will.
Wow. I love the term professional tenant. I haven't heard that before, but I've definitely dealt with them. I started out buying here in Los Angeles, so you can only imagine the level of sophistication of our professional tenants. It's like there's so many lawyers willing to help them, all on contingency, and even a lot of nonprofits that offer legal fees for free. So I have to pay for my lawyers. Right. They get their lawyers for free. And it's very, very difficult. And you're right, like the level of sophistication of some of these tenants is like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how many lawyers they have in their ears. And that's what I'm battling. And it's pretty tough at times.
And you can mitigate that by screening for tenants and making sure you're doing your due diligence on them. But unfortunately, when sometimes you have to buy assets that come with tenants in place, and you can't just ask the seller to evict them because they're on year-to-year contracts or multi-year contracts. So unfortunately, sometimes you do inherit these professional tenants, and it's really tough. So it kind of took all the fire out of my belly for habitation-based real estate. And at that point, I said, I need to go into something where someone's not living in my investment. And that's how I got to storage.
Yeah. I love it. So going back, you had mentioned Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You read that in college, you said?
High school. I was 16 years old when I read that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how much of an impact that book has had. I was actually just at a conference this weekend with Robert Kiyosaki. The conference was a Rebel Capitalist Live, put on by George Gammon, and I got to meet Robert Kiyosaki and talk with him after his talk. We had like a happy hour thing, and it was great. I mean, that guy is, he's still really sharp. He's definitely still pounding the financial literacy. He's really upset with the U.S. education system on not teaching people this. So, I know that you and I are pretty big on educating people about the advantages of real estate. And in fact, that's a lot of what we're doing right now. And I know you put out a lot of blogs about that as well. You have on your website. So I think it's great we keep doing that, trying to educate people more about the advantages of real estate, the advantages of leverage, even the advantages of entrepreneurship, and really taking control of your own destiny. So kudos on doing that. You really put that in a fast forward, like hyperspeed now with SSSE, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, one of the things I always love to say is take massive action. And anytime I meet people, anytime somebody asks me for advice, I'll give them my advice and I'll spend the time. But I say, listen, I'm only going to spend this is my valuable time if you're willing to execute. I don't want to if you just want to passively hear what I'm doing, you can go follow us on our social medias or check out our website, stuff like that. But if I'm going to spend my time trying to educate you personally, I need you to take massive action.
Yeah, I love it. I just finished reading it's an older book, but 10X by Grant Cardone, and one of his big things in there, I don't know if you read it, but he says take
Yeah.
massive action. That's like a big pillar of his 10X philosophy. So I agree with you 100%. And maybe we could talk a little bit about that. I know, talk about your entrepreneurial journey and how taking massive action kind of helped you to where you're at today. The company's, been very successful. You've been doing it for a while. I know for me, I know I want to get from point A to point B, and it's not going to be a straight line. But if I take the massive action, like you say, just keep moving forward, I'm going to learn a little bit, and then I'll adjust, do something, learn a little bit, adjust, and by the time I get to point B, but it's not a straight line, and that's okay. How has massive action helped you? Like talking about the entrepreneurial side of thing, how's that helped you in building your company today?
Yeah, you touched on a lot of great pieces there. So, the entrepreneurial journey isn't just straight up. A great example of this is Ray Dalio's book, Principles, where he kind of has this diagram that shows you go up and then you swirl back down a little bit, then you go farther up, then you swirl back down a little bit, then you go farther up. And knowing that from the get go makes it much easier to swallow setbacks. Another motto I had when I first started out was that it's okay to fail, and it's better to fail early and fail often when the stakes are low, so that when the stakes are high, the you've learned from those failures, you won't repeat those things. So here's some, examples. I'm a big reader. I love to read books, or I should say I listen to books now because most of them are on my Audible. Um, One of the things that I realized early on is that your willpower is fleeting. Everyone's will. It doesn't matter who you are. Your willpower is fleeting. So how do you set up systems around you so that when your willpower fails, you have this external motivator to keep you going? So that's one of the things that I learned very early on is, if you have one foot in the door or one foot out of the door, it's very easy to go back. So here's a perfect example. So I quit Dow. And when I quit, I burned all the bridges because I knew if I left peacefully, then if things got too hard, I'd say, you know what, I could just go back to Dow. So I called them, I gave them 2 weeks notice. And then a day later, I said, hey, my last day is tomorrow. Meet me at the dealership in the morning. I'm going to drop off the keys to the truck. And if anyone's not there to meet me, regardless of what your schedule is, I'm just going to hand my keys to whoever's there. So, really lighting the match and throwing it on the bridge. And then the second motivator that I use is I needed capital. And at the time, the only way I knew how to get capital was with credit cards. So what I did was in one night, I applied to like six. Now I'm going to caveat this with listeners: do not do this. But in one night, I applied to like 64 credit cards. I got 12 approved. And I did them all in the same like 2-3 hour span, so they didn't see the credit checks from the other cards. I got 12 approved. When those 12 showed up about a week and a half later, I cash advanced $97,000 off those credit cards, and that was basically my funding to start the business. So, being an engineer, I love spreadsheets. I love to know things down to like the granular level. So, I actually built out a spreadsheet that showed me not only what my interest payments were per month, but then what they were per week, per day, per hour, per minute, and per second. So I knew when I was being lazy how much money was going out the door per second, right? Per minute. Wow. So that allowed me to take massive action. And then one of the things that I learned in real estate and in life in general, or entrepreneurship in general, is that you'll never have 100% of the information. The unfortunate part about engineers like us is that we want to gather as much information before we make a decision. But the problem is if you wait to get 100% confidence in some information, your opportunity has come and gone, right? So I had to get comfortable with being able to make educated guesses off of, say, it's 70% confidence or 80% confidence in the information I had. So one of the terms that I love to talk about when I was younger is, I would jump out of the plane and then I would start building my parachute on the way down, right? Because at least I'm taking action. It was kind of like this ready, fire, then aim type thing. Because what I've found in life is that typically when you need to make a decision, the consequences of not making decision is usually worse than the consequences of making the wrong decision. So right or wrong, making the decision usually has a better outcome than just being paralyzed and not doing anything. So from that point on, I basically surrounded myself with like-minded individuals to get that, not only the information sharing, but also the motivation and the accountability. And this is where a great book by Napoleon Hill, um, he talks about masterminds. And the Think and Grow Rich is the name of the book. He talks about the importance of joining masterminds. And the nice thing about joining masterminds is that everyone shares freely, especially if the mastermind is set up correctly, where you don't have competing markets or what have you. And that allows people that are more experienced to share what they've learned, to accelerate the growth and trajectory of those that are less experienced. But then also, those that are less experienced may have a different look at the problem or the situation, fresh set of eyes, because they're not within the system. It's very hard to diagnose problems in the system if you're in the system. You have to be looking out. You have to be outside of the system looking in to be able to diagnose. So that was a huge thing for me. So I always tell people, everything I've done, I didn't invent any of this. There was people that came before me that showed me how to do this. And I think there's a good quote. I think it's Benjamin Franklin that says, if I've seen farther, it's because I stand on the shoulders of giants, right? And I really take that into heart. So, real estate and business ownership in general is a team sport. It's not an individualistic sport. So if you're one of those people that is afraid to reach out or afraid to look dumb, you're not going to get very far in business. But if you're someone like me, where any question I have, I truly believe there's no such thing as a dumb question, except for the one that was not asked. So I asked, it doesn't matter how dumb it may have been, I would ask every question because I wanted to get ahead as fast as possible. And I would offer to work for these, especially in the beginning, I would offer to work for these guys that were farther ahead in the process than I was for free. I'd say, hey, I'll work for you for free. The only thing, though, is you have to tell me why I'm doing the things that I'm doing and how it's benefiting you and the company so that I can learn, right? So that has helped a lot with the growth. And then I think on getting a little bit farther in, once I had a couple years under my belt as a full-time business owner, then systemizing how you run the business is so important. So there's two books that I always talk about. Traction by Gino Wickman was one of the ones that had a profound effect on all the companies that I had run in the past, because it gives you an entrepreneurial operating system. Basically, it tells you exactly how to run a company, how to hire people, how to set goals and make sure those goals are SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, reasonable, timely. And then how to break it down from, your big, hairy, audacious goal, your 10-year target, for us, it's a 10-figure exit in 10 years. That's our 10-year target, right? And then distill that down into a 3-year picture and then a 1-year plan. And from that 1-year plan, what are your 90-day goals and rocks? What are your weekly scorecards that you have to hit? And then what are your daily activities that you have to get to that weekly? So I know every day exactly what I need to do. And if I do those things, I will hit a $1 billion exit within 10 years.
Yeah, I love it. I think you're well on your way already. What kind of engineer are you?
Agriculture and biological engineering. So I started off as chemical process engineering. Then I saw there was a huge gap in the market for agriculture and biological engineers. And then because of my sales skills, Dow Chemical, they brought me on as a technical sales rep that understood the chemistries and the ability to explain it in, say, layman's terms to someone that was purchasing it, how it worked, etc.
I love it. Yeah, I'm a civil engineer and then just focus on structural engineering. Got my MS in structural engineering, so I definitely can relate to what you're talking about with the thinking. And it's interesting. A lot of engineers, they have the whole paralysis by analysis thing, right? And it's almost like, I know you're subscribed to this. It's a mindset shift, right? You got to realize, to make a decision with only me, I like to shoot for 80%, like 80% probability is my target. But you got to make a decision, right? You don't wait till you get to 100, because it also, to go from, let's say, from 79 to 80 is a lot faster than to go from 99 to 100, right? That 99 to 100, by that point, you take so much time, you'll never get there. The opportunity be gone. I subscribe 100% to what you're saying there. So I hear you, but it is a little bit of a mindset shift. But I'd like to think that I've made the shift. And sometimes you're right. Sometimes it'll bite you. You'll in hindsight you made the wrong decision, but hindsight's always 20/20. And but you made progress and you improved, and then made another step. So I love it. How have you seen the idea of like maybe two different, we've talked about some of the real estate stuff, we've talked about the business stuff. What about like the differences between like growing a portfolio versus growing a business? I know those are two very distinct things. I admire the way you've kind of overlapped the two. You've been successful in both. Is there something that like one versus the other that you enjoy doing more or you find more challenging than another when talking about growing a portfolio versus growing the business?
Yeah. So, you know, in the beginning, you as the solopreneur, you wear all the hats. But what you should do, even in the beginning, when you're doing everything, you should make a list of things that you like to do, what you don't like to do, what you're good at, what you're not good at. So, starting from the worst are things that you don't like to do that you're bad at, right? That's the very first thing that you outsource or eliminate completely. Then you go to things that you are good at, but you don't like to do. That's the second thing that you outsource. Then you have the things that you like to do that you're not very good at. That's the last thing that you outsource. And then the rest of the things you keep. Those are things that you like to do and that you're good at. That's everything that you keep. So I personally like the education side of our business. I like raising capital. I like structuring debt. I like doing underwriting. I'm not very fast at the underwriting because of my analytical mind. So actually, that was one of the first things that we brought in just because of the volume of deal flow that we have. But in the end of the day, I'll probably always be the one that's doing the speaking engagements, speaking at the conferences, doing the podcasts, writing the books. I'll also be the one that's always raising the capital, mostly on the equity side. And most likely the next hire is going to be someone that's going to take over the entire debt side from us. Now, with that being said, I'll go back to your other question, which is, what's it like running a business or building a business versus building a portfolio? And one of the things I always tell people is that running a real estate business, especially one at high volume and high scale, you actually have multiple businesses within your business. So multiple business units. So for example, number one, I always say this, a real estate business isn't a real estate business. And if you're treating it as a real estate business, you're not going to get very far. What a real estate business truly is a marketing business. Because if you don't have the deal flow, what real estate is there to do, right? Especially in today's world where you have to get creative, you have to find off-market deals, especially where the interest rates are today. It's May of 2023. So that's number one, marketing. And that's not only for deal flow, that's for finding equity investors, limited partners that want to invest in a deal, and finding debt as well. Those are the three parts that you need to do real estate, right? The deal, the money, and the debt. So that's one. Then you have an entire other business in and of itself of servicing those investors, right? Your investor relations and your management, asset management is another division of that, which is, actually looking over the asset, the property management, the operations, et cetera. Then we also, because we do a lot of construction, we have a construction business all on its own, because all they do is the construction piece. They don't really care about what's going on in the other divisions, but it's all of them have to talk to each other because there's handoffs that are very important, very timely, that need to get done.
So that's all in-house for you?
Yeah, all of it's in-house, either in-house or we have some type of 1099 relationship with somebody that we incentivize them appropriately, either with, ownership, partial ownership in the deals, things like that. I'm always someone that believes incentives are the thing that make people run. I mean, on a good day, everyone's going to be altruistic, right? But when, the crap hits the fan and things start going wrong, the very first person that someone thinks of is themselves, right? How am I going to protect myself from this situation? So how do you incentivize them that protect themselves also protects the company, right? And 100% employee, 100% 1099 doesn't really work that way. You need to have some type of upside for that stakeholder, as well as some downside pain if they don't get their job right, right? So, we have basically four main verticals in our business. We have the buying of mom and pop self-storage facilities. Right now, the market is extremely fragmented. About 70% of the self-storage facilities in the United States are owned by mom and pop owners, which are people that own two or fewer self-storage facilities. So one of our verticals is to buy those, do the value add, and then build them into larger portfolios and sell off those portfolios into the next bigger fish into the feeding chain that will buy 20 at a time from us. And then they'll put together a couple of those and then sell 100 off to one of the publicly traded companies. Okay. But the problem with that is we were getting, really good cap rates. We're in secondary and tertiary markets, and the yields are really good. But then all of a sudden, we built this big, hairy, audacious goal of having 8 to 9 million net rentable square feet, 100 to 115 properties that are 69 to 90,000 net rentable. We said we can't keep buying these properties that are 10 to 30,000 net rentable square feet. We need to buy bigger stuff. But then what I realized is the second I jumped over, call it 55 to 65,000 net rentable square feet, the cap rates plummeted. I mean, they went from 8 to 12 caps to like 4 to 5 caps. And the reason why I realized this is because all of a sudden I'm playing in a different pond. Now I'm competing against publicly traded companies and highly funded private equity firms, right? And so I realized, okay, well, if I can't buy it at the yield that I need, I'm going to have to build them. So that's when I started the second kind of vertical of our business, which was buying land in fast appreciating and high population growth markets, so primarily the Southeast, and then building Class A multi-story self-storage facilities. So these are, anywhere between 69 to 100,000 net rentable square feet. They're typically 3 stories. It costs me anywhere between $12 to $16 million to build, and then they're valued usually in the $22 to $28 million a piece, right? So that was all fine and good, and we started doing the construction piece. Was a huge learning curve for me, and then the pandemic hit, right? So the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden now quotes that I had literally 6 weeks, 8 weeks ago were out the door. Steel went up almost 500% in a couple months, right? So I said, okay, and that's even if you can get the materials. I mean, there was so many supply chain issues that even if I was willing to pay 500% for the materials, I couldn't get it on site in a reasonable amount of time. So I said, okay, we got to find a way to circumvent some of these issues. And that's when we got to our third vertical, which are the adaptive reuse conversions. And that's where we noticed kind of 2 things. First, the pandemic was killing all retail shopping, basically in-person retail shopping. So big box retail. The second piece was because of that, a lot of these people were unable to pay their mortgages and were trying to fire sale perfectly good envelopes, these buildings, right? So I was buying Sears buildings, Walmarts, Kmarts, and converting them into Class A self-storage. And the reason we like to do this was not only were we able to drop our total project cost from, say, 120, 125 bucks a foot down to, call it, 80 bucks a foot, 80 to 85 bucks a foot. But on top of that, we also shortened our construction timeline from 12 to 14 months down to like 6 to 8 months because we're already walled in, we're weathered in. The structure is there. And most of the time, the buildings that we would buy, the MEP, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, was already way more than we needed for self-storage. So we got to scale everything down to save money. And so because of that, that's where our kind of third vertical came into fruition. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, we run our real estate business as a marketing business. So number 1 is deal flow. We need to be getting opportunities to underwrite in the door weekly, multiple, tens of 20 deals that we're looking at. The interesting part about that is that we acknowledge that we have very strict buy box criteria because of where we are in the process of building our business. But there are people that were just like me when I first started out that's willing to buy, a high cap rate deal that's only 10 to 20,000 net rentable square feet when I require now that it has to be over 65,000. So then that's when we started our wholesale division of our self-storage company, where we sell off-market properties. We assign the contractual rights of these off-market properties to other investors that are looking to get started in the business. And it allows for the seller to avoid the process of listing and the fees that are associated with that. Also lets us get really creative on how to structure these deals, especially nowadays with interest rates where they are. We do a lot of seller finance structures. We do a lot of equity conversion structures with these sellers, and then that ends up getting a better product for our buyers, that wouldn't have either the experience to how to negotiate these type of creative finance deals, or even how to find these self-storage facilities. If all you're waiting for is the facilities that are listed, that's a fragment. I mean, literally an order of magnitude smaller than what is actually trading in the market off market. Yeah. And so that brings an additional revenue stream. I think last year alone, we clipped probably $5 million in wholesale fees alone, assignment fees. So those are kind of the four verticals that we have.
A couple questions on the I think the second vertical you have, where you're buying the third one where you're buying the boxes. You used to build for 120 a foot, now you're buying for 80 a foot all in. Does that include the 120 down to 80? Does that includes your land and building costs, right? Not just construction costs.
That's total project cost, including acquisition, financing, interest and operating reserves, everything. Yep. That's the total project cost. We were buying these buildings for example, I bought a Sears building for $9 a foot, 110,000 square feet. We bought a Walmart that was at like 20 something dollars a foot. We're making offers now. That market has kind of slowed down a little bit because we're out of the pandemic and people are starting to return to shopping in person. But I mean, we were buying these big boxes at rates that they were asking for leasing. They would ask us to lease it, at $9 a foot, and we're buying it at $9 a foot. So, very interesting. You got to, again, and this comes down to taking massive action, right? That only lasted roughly 2 years where that opportunity was available to us at such a great scale. And if we would have had waited to figure out how to do all this, we would have missed the boat. But instead, I just started finding professionals that were good at adaptive reuse conversions, having meetings with them, brought a few of them on as consultants, and then we started running gun and making offers on all these retail deals to turn them into self-storage.
Yeah, I love it. Did you run into zoning issues when you changed the adaptive use?
No. So, typically where we're buying these adaptive reuse conversions, they're in markets where the municipality doesn't want to see such a large property sit vacant. So some of these, they were dormant for 6+ years. So that's, something that is blighted in the community. Typically, these types of boxes are in major thoroughfares for that municipality, main and main type stuff. Because think about it, shopping malls and retail, they want to be around the same things that self-storage want to be around, right? Dense residential housing, people with a high median income to spend on, whatever they're selling at that retail shop. Yeah. High visibility on major corridors. They have high, vehicle traffic counts per day. So that's everything that we want in storage. So if I'd come, and the biggest thing too is also just making sure the municipality knew what I was talking about. A lot of people, when you say storage, they have the old image of storage, which is these metal boxes on some gravel, and it doesn't look very clean. That's not what we build. We build these Class A. They look like office buildings. They're beautiful, right? Glass and vibrant colors, and it really revitalizes the community. I just got certificate of occupancy of one of these conversions last week on Friday in a area that's about 45 minutes outside of Columbus. And the city already has reached out to say, hey, we're so glad you did this. It looks so much better. Before, there was a lot of graffiti and people were, doing drugs in there and breaking in and blah, blah, blah. And now we're revitalizing a piece of the community. And that brings more business to the surrounding businesses around us. There's two banks, there's a grocery store, there's a McDonald's, there's a bowling alley. So these are kind of things that you kind of help to support the local community, because storage is a hyper localized business. The majority, 60 to 90% of your customer base are going to come from a 5 to 15 minute drive time from your facility, or roughly a 3 to 5 mile radius from around your facility. So why not support the local community by beautifying these derelict properties? Yeah.
Speaking of supporting the communities, I saw that you guys also support, but through donations to local nonprofits in the communities where you're buying as well, right?
Yeah, so we have, four fundamental core values in our company. It's FIDO, so fun, integrity, drive, and then others first, which is the most important one. We just couldn't find a good acronym that started with an O. So, well, because we're such a localized style business, by supporting the people in our community, that ends up supporting us as well. So we have a charitable arm. We donate 1% of our net profits to all of the local charities. And usually what we'll do is we'll ask our managers who are in, those markets and say, hey, is there a cause that is close to you, or people have mentioned when they've come into the store, something that you think would really make an impact in the community. So we've done all sorts of things. It's usually ran by that manager because they're in touch with that local community. They know all the people. So we've done things like toy drives through the police departments, as well as back to school drives where you buy and fill backpacks with school supplies. We sponsor a little league hockey team. We sponsor a little league baseball team. We've donated to battered women's shelters. We've donated to food pantries. We've donated to pet foundation things, because we, both of the owners, me and Steven, we have pets and they're very near and dear to our lives. So anything we can find in the local community that there's a need, and it is an actual need and can provide value to the local community, that's great. And that helps us, not only does it help with the altruistic portion of the company, but in the end of the day, it also brings sales, right? When, I want to tell you that my storage facility is the most beautiful out there, but in the end of the day, I mean, it's concrete and steel. Like every storage facility looks like every other one. So if you have the choice of two facilities and they're both the same cost and same amenities, but one of them will donate to a local cause in your local community, you're more swayed to go to that brand. I mean, look at Tom and or what's it called? Ben and Jerry's ice cream, Tom's shoes. I mean, all of this have kind of the same model where there's other alternatives out there that are the same price, but if you go to ours, we support your local community, and I think that helps quite a bit.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. On the individual properties, do they tend to be manned properties, or do you ever do unmanned properties?
Yeah, so a little bit of both. We've been kind of yo-yoing. So when we first started, we were buying very small properties. They were, $1 million each. They were 1,700 to 17,000 to 25,000 net rentable square feet. So some of those you were able to run completely unmanned. I mean, my very first facility that I bought in August of 2018, not only did it not have an office, it wasn't fenced. They had no utilities. There wasn't even lights there. It was behind a Dunkin' Donuts, And then as we grew, we brought management in house. So we started doing our own management, but now we're getting to the point where the facilities that we're building are so large that we have a hybrid approach. So we're thinking about the lease up, but we're also thinking about, once it's leased up and stabilized, how do we manage them? So we build these now with basically two offices. There's the manned office, and then there's the unmanned office. And the reason for that is self-storage, unlike multifamily, it takes a much longer time to lease up. If you call it a $20 million multifamily property, you can lease that thing up in 8 months. If you build a $20 million self-storage facility, that takes 4 years to lease up, because instead of there only being, 12 units, there's 1,000 units. So that's 1,000 customers you have to bring in. So because of that lease up time, it stresses the debt service coverage ratio. We hire a property manager, actually 2.5 property managers that are really salespeople. They're not managers. They have salesperson profiles. So they're here to, basically walk a beat. So they go out into the local community and they make relationships with assisted living facilities and pizza companies and apartment buildings, and try to share referrals, and they build this whole kind of system. They work with the local chamber of commerce, all this kind of stuff, because we want to drive that lease up velocity as fast as possible to get to stabilization. And then once we hit stabilization, our buildings are set up to be run completely remotely, where a tenant could come in or a customer could come in. They have a unique code that is just for them. So they have to type it in to get into the parking lot. And then once they're in the parking lot, they have to type it in to get into the actual facility, and to get to their, if they have to get into an elevator, the elevator will also have the keypad access. So they can, they can't go to the third floor if their unit's on the first floor. So it's very controlled, and we can watch them move throughout, throughout the building. And then now self-storage has, typically been a laggard in technology, but now with a bunch of this capital that came in the last 10 years, we're seeing this push to kind of really embrace technology in our industry. So now we have these doors that they have a device on them that you can unlock your door with your cell phone. They don't have to carry a physical key. And the cool thing about these devices is they're also motion and heat sensors. So we can find, we can track people as they're moving through the facility. So that not only increases security, but it also increases the customer experience. When I can say to my, my customer, I say, hey, we have a touch-free experience. This was very big in kind of the pandemic time, where I said, you can get to your unit, never see another person, never have to touch anything. Everything's open with your phone. It was another really good selling point. So that's kind of where the industry is going to, and we're kind of early adopters into that. That style of technology. It is still somewhat expensive, but I think with more competitors coming into the market offering similar technologies, that price is going to start coming down quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. So we just closed on our self-storage property 2 weeks ago. It was actually
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. 7 property portfolio, almost 500,000 net rentable space. And part of the value add there is we were eliminating the on-site staff and having, a roving kind of regional manager, if you will, for the 7 properties, and then automating everything else. Right. So we're very much in the middle of a similar path with the automation and taking everything online, the individual access codes, smart locks, which isn't really expensive when you're rolling it out at scale. But the tenants really like it, right? I mean, it's a big plus to have that, and you can cut back a lot on your labor costs. So that's a big value add that we're doing on our self-storage properties.
We've seen, when this technology was first rolled out, we didn't really know if it would be well received. So we've split tested facilities where some of the units have it, some of the other units don't have it. And the units that do have it, we actually charge a technology fee. So it's a, anywhere between $5 to $15 technology fee. And even with those fees, we saw that the units that had the no key lock system rented out first. So that is showing that there is, my biggest problem in the beginning was I was looking at the payback periods, $300 a door, 1,000 doors, how long is it going to take me to make my money back just in the reduced staff? And it just wasn't penciling for a lot of our syndications because they're typically 5-year terms. But then once I saw that we can charge a technology fee on top of the reduced staff, then the payback period, it really shortened to the point where now it is feasible to implement these at a facility-wide scale. And then as well, there's 2 other competitors coming into the space with the exact same type of technology, this smart lock system that you can control from your property management system, and that tenants can basically get to their facility or their unit and open up their unit just with their phone. So I think that's going to further drop the price for those units.
Yeah, I love it. It makes sense. Thinking about it, like my kids' schools have a technology fee. Even my accountant has a technology fee. So it makes sense. I mean, technology, costs money. It's an investment. But I think it's becoming a little bit more normal to pass that along to the customer. Right. It's a good idea.
Yeah. And what we do too is when we're building these Class A multi-story sites, we'll also build a couple drive-up units that are more kind of low tech as well. So we always have the option to say, okay, you don't want to pay the extra, technology fee. We have this other option that is non-climate control outside that you can draw up, and you're going to have to buy a lock, and that's your lock. It's not our lock. So if you lose a key, then you're going to have to go pay for a new key, or pay for us to cut your lock off so you can put a new one on. And it just removes a ton of hassle. So always having the ability for choice has helped quite a bit. Another thing that we do, I don't know if you use this in your facilities, but something that's called dynamic pricing. And then also using the dynamic pricing with a good, better, and best style pricing model. So you say, okay, here's our good model, and that's what we advertise the rates at. But that one is you have to take a elevator to the third story, and it's all the way back in, the corner. Or you can have the better, which is you take the elevator and it's right outside the elevator, or you can have the best. And the best is you walk into the facility and right out of the office or out of the manager's office, there is your unit right there. And what we found is that anywhere between 30 to 50% of the time, people were upgrading at least to the better, if not the best option, even though the advertised rate was our good pricing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're doing the exact same thing and seeing very similar results. It's I mean, I think it kind of points to the level of sophistication that the self-storage market is going through. It's one of the things that attracted me to it. With the multifamily space, it's pretty saturated, especially the larger property sizes. It's pretty saturated with institutional money. A lot of the efficiencies have been built in already. Whereas self-storage, you mentioned earlier, being largely mom and pop, there's a lot of room for growth in that area. In terms of these improvements, and the dynamic pricing model is a great one, and it makes sense. It's just like running on the airlines, right? You want to be in the front of the plane, or you want to be in the back of the plane? You want a window seat, or do you want a middle seat, right? I mean, it's the same seat. You're going from A to B. It's still doing the same thing, but people are willing to pay, and you just have to have the technology and the strategy to kind of work within those bounds, and you can earn a lot more money for it.
That's right.
Last question here before we wrap up. This has been great, by the way. Really, really appreciate you hopping on. What's the biggest challenge that you're seeing right now, either in the market or in the business itself, as you guys are scaling? What are the biggest challenges you're dealing with?
Yeah, so I see three main threats to our business right now, and I'll cover each one and how we mitigate against it. So number one is compressed cap rates. Number two is oversaturation. And then number three is REIT competition. Okay. So let's start with compressed cap rates. 20, 30 years ago, if you were buying a self-storage facility for anything less than a 15% cap rate, people thought you were nuts because they always thought it was an ugly asset, right? But then all of a sudden, like 10 years ago, Fortune and Money Magazine start talking about self-storage, and all of a sudden it becomes the sexy new asset class on the market. And those cap rates start gradually dropping and dropping and dropping. I mean, just last week or 2 weeks ago, Extra Space and Life Storage merged. Extra Space made a $12.7 billion offer to Life Storage. And that, based on my calculations on the number of facilities they had and their net operating income, that's close to a 3.67% cap rate. So sub 4% cap rate in, this is 2 weeks ago. So we're at what I think is going to be at or near the peak of interest rates, right? And it's still sub 4%. So what do you do? It's a competitive acquisition environment. Brokers are stripping a lot of upside out of these deals for buyers. It's good for the sellers. It's bad for the buyers. So the solution is, one, to buy off market versus retail. Two, to buy value add deals versus stabilized deals. And three, to run your company like a marketing company, so that I always tell people the deal of a lifetime comes around every 6 months if you're doing enough marketing, right? I always notice that when people start struggling in the business, the very first thing they cut is marketing budget, which is ridiculous. That's like saying, hey, my car is not going as fast as it used to, so I'm just going to rip the engine out because now the car is more light than it used to be. It's lightweight. That's ridiculous, right? That's number one. Number two is oversaturation. And the reason for this is that there has been this land grab, really, to stake a flag in the market. The reason for that is because of what we talked about, the fragmented nature of this industry. Of the 6 publicly traded REITs, they own roughly 18 to 20% of the entire market. Okay. So unlike multifamily, where that's, the publicly traded companies own almost 90% of all of the product out there. Then under that 20%, you have the next 100 largest operators, which I'm a part of, right? We only own another 8 to 10% of the market. The next 100 largest operators, 8 to 10%. And then that leaves 70% of the rest, the mom and pop operators. So what people are trying to do is they're trying to do what we're doing, which is build up these portfolios, because there is a premium to a larger size portfolio. If you go from a $2 million property to a $20 million portfolio or a $50 million portfolio, even if all the assets inside individually would trade at, say, a 7 cap, in that portfolio, they're going to get anywhere between 100 to 250 basis point premium just because of the size, right? Because of the amount of money that's in the market. The second reason for oversaturation is the super cheap construction costs. Compared to building multifamily, you can build a decent multifamily nowadays, depending on your market, for anywhere between $350 to $450 a foot, and get similar rents per square foot that you would get from self-storage at 120, 130 bucks a foot, construct the all-in cost, right? Total project cost. So that's causing the supply index to drop year over year. So the solution to this, or how do you mitigate this oversaturation risk, is the importance of underwriting and third-party feasibility studies. I always tell my investors, if you have anyone that's pitching you any type of real estate deal where all of the underwriting is internal, how do you not know that they have rosy colored glasses on? You need, even us, this is a bias that we don't even realize is happening to us when we're looking at deals, because all of a sudden red flags start looking like pink flags and pink flags start looking like white flags. So you need third-party feasibility, and you need to find markets that are undersupplied. And then the last piece is, of course, the REIT competition. The REITs, to be a REIT, you usually have to outlay about 90% of your cash flow. So they have unlimited capital that's needing deployment. And in the last 5 to 10 years, this age of easy money, if you will, they went out and raised a ton of money. I mean, Extra Space alone went out to the European bond market, and they issued a $500 million bond at 8.875%. So, 7/8%. And that's their equity portion, right? And then you look at the credit facilities that they have, and that's maybe, 3% on the cost. So their combined cost of capital between their equity and their debt's like 2 point something percent. So if they buy a 4 cap, they're already doubling their money, Yeah. So, and then the second issue with REIT competition is typically because they're publicly traded, their investment timelines are much longer. So where I'm trying to basically bring a deal or a portfolio full cycle within 5 to 7 years, a REIT is willing to put the money up front because they need to spend it, or else they lose their favorable tax status. And they're willing to park that money in a piece of ground or a piece of property and not develop for 10 or 20 years, because they know the path of progress is coming, and they can go a lot farther out in the path of progress than we can. So they're buying land much cheaper, they're buying facilities much cheaper, and then they're holding them for a long period of time. So investing on a 30-year timeline as opposed to 5 to 7 like we are. So an option, or how we mitigate that risk, is number one is avoiding primary markets and focusing on secondary and tertiary markets. Or if you are going to go to the primary markets, focus on the area between the suburbs and the rural areas. So they're on the path to progress. You already see some of the large home builders like J.R. Horton coming in and staking 1,000, houses to be developed over the next 5 years, and buying in those markets and then building for the demand that's going to be there in the next 4 to 5 years. So that's kind of the three main risks we see to our business and how we mitigate those risks.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, that's really well thought out. I'm pretty impressed.
Thanks.
You really know your challenges, and you got a mitigation plan for it. You almost sound like an engineer.
Yeah. Exactly. Plan A, B, C, D, E, and F.
Contingency plans, baby. You got to have them.
Right.
That's great. Well, this has been super helpful. I think our listeners will really enjoy this. If they wanted to get in touch with you, or if they're interested in investing with self-storage syndication equities, what's the best way for our listeners to reach out?
Yeah. So to come back to in the beginning of the podcast, we were talking about massive action, right? So the more passive way to reach me is you can go to our website, which is ssse.com. You can follow us on social media at, Self-Storage Syndicated Equities or Triple SE. You can follow me personally on social media. At the Storage Stud is my handle. But if you're willing to take massive action, what I'll do is I'll give your listeners my personal cell phone number. This is my real cell phone number. It's area code 630-408-8090. That's my real number. So shoot me a text or give me a call if you'd like to get started now, and we can help you out.
Yeah, that's a big perk. I know you're a really busy guy and you don't give out your phone number everywhere. So I really appreciate you doing that for our viewers. Sure. And really super excited for everything that you guys are doing over there, leading the charge, blazing a path. And I'm excited to be in Raise Masters with you, growing the businesses together. So thanks a lot, Fernando. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Chad.
All right. You can see, despite being in business for less than 10 years, Fernando's done some amazing things with SSSE. Be sure to subscribe below and let us know any comments you have on the videos. We'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks for watching.